Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I've actually never seen these slides before, so this should be very, very interesting. Life and death, destiny and great deeds, answers to mysteries, the search for one's true path. The mind can comprehend all of these, and then such concepts can be written down as a sequence of formulas, a series of lines, a chain of thought. Still, a moment always comes when it is time to wrap up, to reach a conclusion, to put a period at the end of the last sentence. On the day of the great battle at the Threshold Fortress, a new name joined the divine pantheon of Golarion. Contrary to the laws of creation and the limitations imposed upon mortal kind, the individual once known as the commander of the Fifth Crusade attained greatness, power, and immortality. This new power was likewise assumed by both the commander's loyal companions and the writer of these words. We all received might comparable to that of the heralds of demigods. Like blots of rust, the abyss was disfigured by the growing borders of the land of death and decay, as the former realms of Baphomet and Deskari became the commander's realm. The commander's story became legend, one that was spread far and wide in the songs of bards. The tale fell upon the ears of many, those eager to convert to the new faith, and those who nursed ambitions of replicating the commander's achievement. It is no exaggeration, then, to declare that the commander's ascension on that day changed the world forevermore. The former lands of the Worldwound became a realm of death. The dark towers of Dresden enticed many who yearned for a taste of forbidden knowledge. Undead legions safeguarded the necromancers who spat on Pharasma's taboo as they delved into the mysteries of death. Each of them sought to follow in the commander's footsteps, to throw out the chains of mortality and find eternal undeath. The memory of Tar-Baphon and his deeds faded, and the shadow of a new, far more terrifying evil fell upon Avestan. When the commander butchered the defiant crusaders in Dresden, it did not go unnoticed. The Knights of Ozum called upon every Golarion nation to join them in a shining crusade against the new threat, but few rulers answered the summons. Memories of that horrific massacre were still too fresh in their minds. The short-tempered Lich Zacharius did not depart Dresden as he intended. His respect for the commander compelled him to change his plans, and the Crusade leader's former mentor took on the task of instructing the novices who were flocking to the fortress. His training produced a great many talented mages, almost as many as he killed for insufficient diligence in their studies. As the leader of the Crusaders, the commander won their loyalty and obedience. Even in the Crusade's darkest hours, the commander found ways to restore the army's supply lines. His military acumen was beyond question. Under his leadership, the divided, poorly trained Crusader forces were reforged into an invincible army. With the war concluded, most of its defenders hastily left Dresden. What? I maxed out military. What is the problem? That's not true. Okay, whatever. With the war concluded, most of its defenders hastily left Dresden. The memory of the terrible sacrifices made in the battles for the city were too hard to bear. Within a century, Dresden had become a dilapidated, insignificant backwater. After the Battle of Threshold, Queen Galfrey vanished. Some claimed that they had seen her in the waste around Is, while others told stories about her being held against her will in the dungeons of Dresden. The ward stones from the chains that once guarded the borders of Mendev were carefully disassembled one by one. The angels that had been trapped inside returned to heaven to heal their wounded spirits and prepare for new battles against evil. The Lady in Shadow found a way to benefit from the situation by magnanimously accepting the warriors from the destroyed armies of Baphomet and Deskari. She significantly bolstered the might of the Midnight Owls. Few realized that the commander had effectively foiled Nocticula's plans with his decision to keep the passage between the Abyss and Golarion open. The Lady in Shadow began preparing her defenses in secret. She knew that sooner or later, invaders would appear in her realm, and it mattered not whether they would be demons or mortals. Baphomet was too cunning for his own good and died his final death. Rumors say that, upon hearing of Baphomet's demise, Asmodeus permitted himself a satisfied chuckle that shook the halls of hell. The Demon Lord Deskari died his final death, and his cult perished with him. His followers and demonic minions entered the service of Deskari's sire, Pazuzu. Whether Pazuzu's terrifying rage stemmed from his offspring's demise or from his failure, none can tell. Shortly after the war against the Worldwound, Avestan was struck by a series of frightening events. A magical storm woven from the four elements obliterated an entire city in Varisia. Then, a horrible pestilence came to the lands of the Lenorm kings, and after that, Irison reported an outbreak of madness in their lands. The lunatics were all repeating the same ominous warning, word for word. The slaves have forgotten the hand of their master, but Alderpash, Rune Lord of Wrath, has returned to remind them just how firm his grip is. Having rediscovered his own story, the storyteller rejected the goddess's proposal. He was celebrated as a great historian and rightfully held the position of Dean of the History faculty at the Arcanumerion, the most renowned academy in Absalom. Another 40 years passed before his age caught up with him, and it was his turn to appear before the Lady of Graves. Camillia's euphoria at gaining semi-divine power quickly passed, giving way to irritability. Murder had once filled her with tremulous excitement, whereas now it brought her nothing but boredom, given that she was never in any danger. Unable to come to terms with her new status, she left her best friend and disappeared, losing herself among the planes of the multiverse. After Horgus's death, an unknown half-elf woman laid claim to his fortune. She introduced herself as Horgus's daughter and presented his will as proof. However, having received the fortune, the young woman transferred it to Mendev's treasury under a single condition. She insisted that the name of the Gorham family should be forever remembered in Mendev's chronicles as one of the state's greatest benefactors. Land's ascension left him perplexed. He had intended to die in the war against the demons, but instead he was suddenly granted eternal life, and he had no idea what to do with it. After getting some advice from the commander, he made a to-do list: go on a sea voyage, learn to read and write well, and, of course, defeat a few hundred more demons, just for old time's sake. Wenduog refused to ascend with the commander. She wished to walk her path alone, for solitude brings strength. After the war, the Huntress left the commander's service and, having cobbled together a band of ruthless mercenaries out of veteran crusaders, went to the River Kingdoms to conquer one of them for herself. For a handful of years, she ruled over a dozen villages, until the local lords joined forces to put an end to her reign. Ascension was a true challenge for Ember. For years, she had rebuked the good gods for doing so little to help mortals, but now she finally understood the burden of divinity. Realizing that even her new powers were not enough to save all who suffered, she went to heaven, to her grandma, the Imperial Lord Andaletta, and asked to be her apprentice. But she continued to visit the mortal world to aid the defenseless, or to convince a villain to change their ways. Ascension opened up fascinating opportunities for Nanio. Now she could discover if a high priest of Iomedae could convert Numerian barbarians if he happened to be teleported into their midst. He couldn't. Discover how many women in Absalom screamed at the sight of a dead mouse on their pillow, approximately 34%, and see what two armies would do if all their weapons disappeared the night before the battle. They would make peace. Darren Arende, who had always despised piety in all forms, suddenly became an object of worship himself. Among followers of the rapidly growing Church of the Commander, the Count was the most popular associate of the new deity. He was the one most often pictured at the Commander's side in religious paintings and reliefs, possibly because artists found the handsome Aasimar to be the most appealing subject. As for Darren himself, he solemnly swore never to answer a single prayer, and it seems he duly kept his promise. Walter Jethro gladly accepted his semi-divine powers, since, as he told anyone who would listen, he deserved them. When he had to, he followed his chief everywhere, and whenever he had a spare minute, he descended to Golarion to steal whatever caught his eye, free a random tiefling from prison, or hide stolen property in one of his many stashes throughout Golarion. Acquiring incredible power did not change Reginald Renge in any way. He had already been working on a 500-year plan for the fight against chaos and smoothly switched to devising a plan to definitively solve the problem of the Abyss. Even devils respected his assiduousness. Regil, in return, found the discipline in the ranks of Hell to be somewhat lacking. Upon gaining semi-divine powers, Greybor lost an interest in the assassin's craft. There were too few opponents worthy of his skill. He became the patron of mortals who respected and honored the law of the streets. The cult known as the Backstreet Wardens formed under his patronage and consisted of thieves, bandits, murderers, and other dregs of society, but they all shared an understanding, a code. On occasion, Greybor himself enjoyed a nighttime stroll through the city in the guise of an ordinary mortal, just to remind the lowlifes that reputation carries more weight than coin. For the longest time, the ascended succubus could not bring herself to set foot in Elysium. She felt as though she would defile it with her presence. Arueshalae mustered the courage to appear before Desna only after the goddess sent her a prophetic dream. No one knows what the former demon discussed with the goddess, but after that meeting, Arueshalae would often descend to the material plane, where, as an unseen angel, she would keep watch over mortals, helping those who had gone astray to find redemption.
And what of me, the writer of these words? The half-demon witch known as the architect of the Worldwound. I gained more than I could have hoped. I achieved my purpose. I vanquished death. Untold might and all eternity lie ahead. How should I spend that eternity? I have not yet decided. But I know, from experience, I know that every moment is priceless if it is spent with the one who matters most to you. I have recounted the story of my life for you, Pharasma, Lady of Graves. Not only of my life, but of the Commander's also. I believe the tale of such an illustrious figure would pique even a goddess's curiosity. I have come here to say that he and I are no longer in your power. This is the last, most significant result of my transformation experiment.
He is no longer within my power. This is true. Divinity has given him the right to decide his own fate. But you entered my boneyard to bring me these tidings. And it is within my power to unmake you, destroy you, and erase you from the cosmos. I wonder, did he anticipate such an outcome? Did he purposefully choose you to be his emissary?
And this is why I wanted 6 crystals. So if we just had 5 crystals, this conversation would go the way it usually does. But because we have 6 crystals, we get to be a Lich, a master of the undead, who does a direct intervention with Pharasma. I don't know what happens here, but I'm hoping it's something unique. Intervene. You have no right to decide our fates, Pharasma.
I have relayed my message. Farewell, Lady of Graves. We will not meet again.
Their combined power has grown immensely, enough to almost rival my own. So be it.
Ah, how does she not feel disrespected at this Lich defiling her homeworld? Oh well. Only get so much in one playthrough.